As you can probably tell from the vista behind me, we are in Paris, the city of love. And you know, there are 1,000,001 videos on YouTube about what it's like to visit Paris. So we're going to try and be a little bit original and make it interesting and give you some information that perhaps you might not necessarily or ordinarily come to know about this incredible city. So stay with us as we travel through Paris.
We're starting our journey to Paris in our hometown of Basel in Switzerland. And the most convenient way to get there, I believe, is on the train. The TGV arrives into Basel, and it's about a 3-hour direct journey straight to Paris Gare de Lyon. Very, very convenient, very easy, very smooth. The TGV hits speeds of somewhere around 300 kilometers an hour, so the trip to Paris is really quite fast. When you arrive into Paris here at Gare de Lyon, it's very convenient to get out of there, and you find yourself right in the middle of Paris without having to travel from the airport into town, for example. And it's quite a short Uber ride from Gare de Lyon pretty much to anywhere that you might want to go in Paris. Now, knowing where to stay in Paris is always a little bit of a challenge, I think. It's one of those cities, it's a bit like London or New York, where you've got these different areas that have such a distinct and different flavor and atmosphere to other areas that it really comes down to what your personal preference is. Most of the time, I've tended to stay in the Latin Quarter, which is around the Sorbonne, the university, and I've always found that quite interesting and quite nice. But of late, I'm finding it a little bit too touristy for my tastes, having been to Paris many times. So I've stayed in areas like La Défense, really all over the city. But this time, we chose to stay in Les Halles, which is back across the other side of the river near the Marais, which is the gay area. And you've got such distinct buildings and things there as the Georges Pompidou Centre, which is really quite a interesting modern architectural design building that you can see straight ahead there. It's an interesting area. I found it very nice, and I think if I were to go back again this time, I would stay again in Les Halles.
I'm standing here in front of the world famous Stravinski fountain in Paris, and as you can see, as a fountain it doesn't really work so well. It's not really fountaining so much, and apparently, according to my expert source, Mr. Kershaw, it has been thus for at least the last 5 years. So things take their own sweet time here in Paris, which is one of the beautiful things that we love about this incredible and amazing city. It doesn't really fountain so well. I guess you got to add water for a start.
I want to deal with the sort of stereotype of the rude Parisian. Now, I'm going to call bullshit on this because personally, I haven't found Parisians to be any ruder than anybody else in any big city in the world. Have you ever been to New York, for example? If you've got a couple of words of French, if you make an attempt to try and, at least have a couple of sentences that you can speak in French, then, they're extremely helpful. Certainly as helpful as any other people or waiters or service people anywhere else in the world. Most of them speak pretty decent English, I think, certainly better than my French. And I've never had any trouble with people, being rude to me in Paris. It's just not my experience there at all. And naturally, No trip to Paris is complete without a visit to the Eiffel Tower. There's a couple of tricks and traps, I'd say, that surround any visit to the Eiffel Tower. And I've been there many, many times over the last 20 years or so. The best way to do it is to book yourself a visit online on the internet. And that way you don't have to wait in the enormous queues to try and get up in the elevators to visit the Eiffel Tower. You can arrive at your appointed time and pretty much go straight up and take a look at the view from the tower up there. It's incredible. There are a lot of pickpockets, a lot of people trying to sell you stuff, a lot of touts going on around the base of the Eiffel Tower. So keep your wits about you, hang on to your stuff, keep your purse in your wallet, where you can feel them, and just be very, very careful as a general rule. The Louvre is somewhere that you'll also want to pay a visit. It's an amazing former palace from, I think, back in the Louis XIV, Louis XVI type of era. It's an amazing building, and the entrance is via another iconic little structure which is more modern, and that's this pyramid that you can see there in the center. There can be quite a queue to get into the Louvre, so make sure you allow enough time for that. I guess the most famous inhabitant of the museum in the Louvre is the Mona Lisa, and I got to say, it's one thing to stand in front of the Mona Lisa. It's such an iconic piece of art, but it's not so big. It's quite small, very small, in fact. And so I was struck by, just the fact that I was there looking at the Mona Lisa, but it was kind of incongruent with the fact that it was such a small painting, and there's always a huge queue of people around it, as you can well imagine. So, it's going to take you a bit of time to get up the front and to take your selfie quickly and then move on. Keep your wits about you when you're in Paris. There's a lot of beggars and pickpockets and homeless people there. It's not great, but you need to be alert and just make sure that you look after your stuff. I'm making this video in January of 2020, and as you can see, the Notre Dame is still suffering the effects of that dreadful fire that ran through it about a year or so ago. Of course, food is an important aspect of any visit to Paris. And I've got to say, look, in all honesty, it's pretty hard to go too far wrong when you're in Paris. There are a lot of bistros, typical Parisian bistros around the place, offering, everything from escargot to frog's legs to baguettes to croque monsieur to all sorts of typical French fare. It's very, very hard to go too far wrong. I mean, you can. I've been to a couple of places which are a little bit too touristy for my liking, and the food wasn't so great. But if you sniff around, you'll soon find a little restaurant or a bistro which will be to your taste. It's really very difficult to go too far wrong. Getting around Paris is important. It's an important sort of decision that you'll need to make while you're there. How are you going to get around Paris? Now, to be honest, the most convenient way is really the underground. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of public transport for myself. I'm a bit of a lush like that. But it really is the best way to get around. It's similar to London, you're better off catching the underground. One of the things that the mayor of Paris is doing is creating artificial roadblocks or areas of roadworks to artificially create traffic jams and to that way, or in that way, dissuade or discourage people from bringing their cars into the centre of Paris. I guess in the longer term, you know, it will make the city a better place. But if you do want to get around using an Uber or get around using a car, it really, you know, you'll spend a lot of time sitting in traffic. So it's a bit of a pain in the ass, to be honest. So consider using the metro. It's probably the most convenient, or it is the most convenient and easiest way to get yourself around Paris. As you stroll up the Champs-Élysées, you will eventually hit another one of Paris's iconic structures, and that of course is the Arc de Triomphe. It was built originally to celebrate France's military victories, and you know, it's quite an incredible structure to go and have a look at. You can climb up the Arc de Triomphe. There's something like, from memory, 286 or 300 steps or something that you need to climb up. But the view from up there is really extraordinary, and it's well worth the effort. We didn't bother this time because we've done it in the past and we're getting a bit old and the knees are getting a bit weak. But certainly, if you've not done it before, it's certainly worth the trip up the Arc de Triomphe. You can look out from there and see right across Paris. You can see across to the Eiffel Tower, and you can get yourself some terrific photographs. Paris is a city that you don't want to rush. You know, you can't rush Paris. You have to relax and enjoy the place. And one of the things that we like to do there, it's a very Parisian thing to do, is just to sit in a cafe and just watch the world go by. Watch people go by about their daily lives. One of the things that you'll notice about the cafes in Paris, if you take a seat outside, like you can see these folks here, that has a different pricing structure, you know, to if you take a seat inside. Those seats out the front there are prime real estate, and to drink a coffee there will cost you more than it will cost you to take a seat inside the cafe itself. Just one of those little idiosyncrasies of Paris.
Okay, as you would.
Another area that I like to visit in Paris is the, I guess, combined area of the Sacré-Cœur, the old church up on the hill, and the adjacent area of Montmartre, which is the area where all the artists have been plying their trade for decades now. It's a very interesting area. The church, the cathedral is beautiful. It's a beautiful piece of architecture, beautiful piece of religious architecture. But then also to stroll around the artists' square and see the artists at work there is also quite a fascinating experience. There are a number of really nice restaurants around the area, so it's a great place to sort of wander around, go and take a bit of a look at the artists at work, and have yourself a bite to eat. Now here's another little tip. If you're going to visit this area on a Sunday, the local government has restricted the use of cars around Montmartre and Sacré-Cœur on Sundays. So the best way to get there is using the subway, of course. But if, like us, you're feeling a little bit lazy on the way home and want to catch an Uber, then you're going to have to walk outside of this restricted or car restriction zone that they implement on Sundays. It doesn't take too long, and it's a downhill walk, so it's pretty easy, but it takes maybe 10 minutes to get from there to somewhere where you can catch an Uber. So thanks for taking a moment to watch our short video. We hope it's been informative and that you've got some good tips and tricks out of it. Please take a moment and consider subscribing to our channel, hit the notifications bell, and also hit the like symbol so you don't miss any future content that we post.